Hi, welcome back again. Today I am going to explain a biography, comedy, drama film from 2011, titled The Intouchables. Please like, share, and subscribe. Driss is driving his employer Philippe through Paris late one night. When sitting in traffic becomes too tedious, Driss exceeds the speed limit and begins driving quite quickly, dodging other cars and disregarding traffic signs. The cops pursue him, and Driss bets €100 that he can lose them, but after driving under a bridge, the cops ambush them from both sides. Driss, on the other hand, doesn't seem too concerned, and this time he bets €200 that he can get them an escort. When the cops force him out of the car, he begins to act out, behaving offensively and telling them Philippe can't move and that he was taking him to the hospital. When the officers discover the wheelchair in the truck and approach Philippe, they notice him convulsing. Which is also an act. Because it's an emergency, the cops forgive Driss for exceeding the speed limit and offer to accompany him to the hospital. Driss plays September by Earth, Wind and Fire to celebrate winning the bet, and when they arrive at their destination, he shares a cigarette with Philippe as soon as the cops leave. Driss promises to handle it and drives them away just as the hospital staff arrives. This friendship has been going on for a long time. Philippe and his assistant Magali are conducting interviews to find a new caregiver for him, but things aren't going well because all of the applicants have very standard or awkward answers to their interview questions. But they're taken aback when Driss storms in, ignoring the fact that it's not yet his turn, because he just wants some papers signed saying they won't hire him so he can collect unemployment benefits. He's blunt and a little rude, even hitting on Magali, but Philippe finds him amusing and invites him back the next day to sign his papers. Driss returns to his humble neighborhood home and tries to take a bath while all of his little siblings bother him, only managing to finish on time thanks to his older sister Mina, who is more responsible than the others. While waiting for their mother, he notices his brother Adama getting out of a suspicious car through the window. When the boy enters the apartment, he simply says he was at school and then leaves after grabbing his bag, making Driss even more convinced that he's up to something. When his mother arrives in the evening, he gives her a Faberge egg he stole and tells her he's been away on vacation when she asks. She's not happy to see him, though, because he's been gone for 6 months and hasn't called, and now he's appeared out of nowhere, as if her house were a hotel. She kicks him out and tells him not to come back because she's had enough of his lies and has other children to care for. Driss spends the night with some neighborhood friends, smoking and snacking. The next day, Driss returns to Philippe's house for his papers, and he is greeted by Yvonne, the housekeeper, who shows him around and tells him about Philippe's daily routine. She also shows him the room he would get for himself, complete with his own bathroom. Driss can't help but stare at the bathtub before being dragged to Philippe, who not only offers the signed sheet of paper but also a job opportunity. Philippe bets Driss won't last 2 weeks if he accepts the 1-month trial. Driss is taught how to care for Philippe after bringing his belongings to his room. He must learn how to keep his legs stimulated, how to transfer him to a wheelchair, and how to assist him in showering and changing his clothes. Things become awkward when Driss discovers that he must put on high stockings and even clean his buttocks after Philippe uses the restroom, but no matter how much he complains and says he won't do those chores, he eventually accepts them as part of his job. Later that evening, while eating on the roof, he is interrupted by Philippe's daughter Elisa and her boyfriend Bastien, who are looking for a private place to make out, and he kicks them both out after refusing to share his beer. Driss quickly adapts to Philippe's daily routine, even if he makes some rookie mistakes, such as handing the phone to Philippe instead of putting it on his ear or forgetting the baby monitor while taking a bath. He also learns to organize his mail into folders, most of the letters he opens for Philippe, but there are a few private ones he isn't allowed to see. When he comes across a flyer promoting female escorts, he decides to keep it instead of throwing it away, as Philippe suggests. But it's not all work in this new life for Driss. He still makes an effort to have fun, attempting to hit on Magali but failing, and occasionally calling escorts to join him in bed. After Yvonne arrives in his room to chastise him for being late, she discovers some dangerous weapons in his bag, but she makes no comment on them. Driss' job today is to drive Philippe around, but he refuses to put him in the back of a van as if he were cargo, so he takes him in one of the fancy cars that are rarely used. Philippe, who initially thinks this isn't appropriate and says they should be pragmatic, soon becomes excited about the prospect of a faster, less boring ride, though Yvonne remains disapproving. When they try to leave the building, a neighbor parks in front of their door, despite the sign on the door that says it's forbidden. Driss doesn't waste any time in pursuing the man, grabbing him by the front of his shirt and threatening him until he moves the car. Philippe is impressed by his actions, but Yvonne, as usual, is not. The pair visits a museum, where Philippe intends to purchase a piece of artwork that Driss believes isn't worth the money because it's just a red blotch on canvas. Philippe then meets with a relative, who informs him that everyone is concerned about Driss because he can be violent. He's also discovered that he has a criminal record, but Philippe is unconcerned. He admires Driss because he doesn't pity him and doesn't mind joking around with him. Driss has dinner with Yvonne in the kitchen after another failed hit on Magali, while Philippe dictates a letter to Magali. Yvonne turns off the baby monitor, claiming it's a private conversation, and proceeds to explain what's going on. Philippe is pen pals with a woman named Eleanor. These are the letters he refused to open in front of Driss. But he's never met Eleanor in person, theirs is a purely virtual one. Speaking of love, Driss makes fun of Yvonne for the looks the gardener gives her every night before bed. He's attempting to sleep when he notices some strange sounds coming from the baby monitor. Philippe is having difficulty breathing. Driss goes to his room and gently guides him through the attack with soothing words and a wet cloth to wipe his face, unable to ignore him no matter how hard he tries. Philippe eventually falls asleep, only to awaken moments later, claiming he needs to get some fresh air. This time, Driss doesn't hesitate. He straps Philippe into the wheelchair, wraps him in blankets, and takes him for a walk along the river. Philippe hasn't seen Paris at night in a long time, and now that he's more relaxed, he tells Driss that the medicine can only do so much and that he sometimes experiences phantom pain. When they see some girls walking by, Philippe admits that he isn't capable of pleasing a woman because of his situation, but he can get some satisfaction by having his ears massaged because they are sensitive zones. When the phantom pain reappears, Driss shares one of his joints with Philippe, who is skeptical at first but eventually falls in love with it. After that, they go to a restaurant and joke around while eating, and Philippe decides to share more of his story. He met his wife while they were students, and shortly after they married, she miscarried 5 times and was diagnosed with an incurable, terminal illness. That's when they decided to adopt Elisa. Philippe has always enjoyed competitions, extreme sports, and speed, which a paraglider provided. Bad weather caused him to crash and break his vertebrae during a paragliding session, but he still believes his real handicap isn't the chair, but living without his wife. Philippe remembers the date and realizes Driss has passed his 1-month trial period and is now officially hired. But he must first return the Faberge egg he stole because it was a gift from his wife. She gave him one every year, and he has exactly 25, matching their time together. The next day, Driss goes to see Mina as she is leaving school, who is irritated because he hasn't responded to her messages except to ask her to look for the egg. She also tells him about some cops who have been calling their house. Following that, he pays a visit to Adama, who admits to having 30 grams on him. Driss offers to take Adama to lunch, but Adama declines and instead boards the same suspicious car as before. Later, Driss is permitted to be present while Philippe dictates his letter to Magali on behalf of Eleanor. He thinks Philippe should be more direct and that this purple prose is very boring. He's also perplexed that this has been going on for 6 months and they've never exchanged pictures. When he discovers her phone number on one of the letters, he interprets it as a sign and calls her, forcing Philippe to pick up the phone and finally speak to her outside of the written word. Philippe is now constantly on the phone with her, even right before he and Driss attend the opera, during which Driss laughs and makes fun of the costumes. The next day, Driss persuades Philippe to accept an exchange of photographs with Eleanor, and he selects one of him in his wheelchair. After that, while he's painting, Elisa bursts into his room and asks for cigarettes, mocking him for attempting to be artistic. He kicks her out before going to see Philippe, who is currently requesting that Yvonne change the chosen picture to one of him when he wasn't quadriplegic. Right before Driss bursts in, complaining about Elisa and telling Philippe he needs to discipline her, she hides the picture inside the escort file, which Yvonne agrees with. Philippe agrees to speak with her, but he's taken aback and Driss reveals that he's been painting. Days pass, and Philippe and Driss' friendship grows stronger. Philippe gets him his first suit and scolds his daughter while Driss listens to him through the baby monitor. Driss shows his first painting to Magali, who slaps him when he attempts to kiss her. Philippe, on the other hand, likes the painting and says he'll try to sell it. They have a lot of fun together, doing things like getting a faster car, sharing joints, and even hiring escorts together. Philippe isn't overjoyed when his birthday arrives. Every year, he acts surprised that they're throwing a party and has to meet with all these relatives who only come to see him on the date to make sure he's still alive. Philippe predicts that it will all be rather boring. Driss searches for Elisa, who is crying in her room after taking some of Yvonne's pills, which did not kill her as she expected. She's upset because Bastien dumped her and called her a tart, so she asks Driss to talk to the boy, which he agrees to do for a fee. Meanwhile, Philippe is showing Driss painting to a relative and persuades him to buy it for 11,000 euros. Driss returns to the dining room and speaks with Yvonne, who informs him that Magali is in a relationship with someone named Fred, but that things are rocky at the moment, which gives Driss hope. As the party winds down, Philippe forces Driss to listen to some of classical music's most important songs, but all he can do is laugh. After the band has finished, he takes out his iPod and plays Boogie Wonderland by Earth, Wind and Fire before dancing in the middle of the floor. He's a fantastic dancer who even persuades the rest of the party to join him and dance with him, which Philippe enjoys watching. Driss later reads Eleanor's latest letter to Philippe before putting him to bed. She's sent him a picture of herself, which shows she's quite attractive, and says they should meet next week when she visits Paris. When the big day arrives, Yvonne and Driss dress Philippe in dozens of outfits until he finds the perfect one. And, because Yvonne will be driving Philippe to the date, Driss spends his day off visiting Bastien and threatening him until the boy agrees to apologize to Eliza and bring her croissants every day. He also asks him to fix his hair. Following that, he pays a brief visit to his mother at work, but only to observe her from a distance. Yvonne and Philippe are waiting for Eleanor, who is running late, at the restaurant. Philippe gives up after an hour of waiting, calls Driss to ask him to take him away, and then leaves the restaurant without noticing Eleanor arrives at the same time. Philippe takes Driss in his private plane that night and gives him the money he received for selling the picture, making him ecstatic. The next morning, they arrive in the countryside, and Philippe decides to go paragliding, dragging Driss along with him. Driss is adamantly opposed to it, but after initially freaking out, he finds himself enjoying the experience. When they get home, Adama is waiting for Driss and is chastised when he notices the scars on his face. Driss still won't tell Adama what's going on in his life, so he makes him wait in his room while he calls Mina and tells her not to worry before going to put Philippe to bed. Philippe, on the other hand, is not yet sleepy. After forcing Driss to look at a painting with him, he asks him about his family, which Driss initially refuses to discuss but eventually agrees to. Adama isn't technically his brother, and his parents aren't his parents, they're his aunt and uncle. They brought him from Senegal when he was 8 years old because they couldn't have children. His real name is Bakary Baysari, but because other children had that name, they nicknamed him Idris, which became Driss. His aunt miraculously became pregnant one day, and after his uncle died, there were other men and more children. Philippe, in the same way that Driss had talked to him about Elisa, points out that Adama needs discipline, so he fires Driss so he can be with his family because he can't spend his entire life caring for an elderly man. Driss packs his bags and prepares to leave the next morning, after Bastien has brought his daily croissant while sporting a better hairdo. When Driss tries to hit on Magali one last time, she introduces him to his significant other Fred, which is short for Frederic, turns out Magali isn't interested in men, and Driss gives up on the spot. On his way out of the house, he gives the baby monitor back to Yvonne and teases her for having lied to him about Magali just to mess with him. In exchange, she gives him the escort file he started, and he is disappointed to discover that the picture he chose is hidden within. Driss discards the file, but keeps the photograph for himself. When he gets outside, he finds another car blocking the entrance, so he asks him to move even though he no longer works there. Driss says it's a matter of principle when Adama calls him out on it. A few hours later, the two brothers go to the station to pick up their mother. While back at the house, Philippe is having his first dinner with his new caretaker, who is stuffy and boring, and Philippe decides to leave him without even taking a bite. Nobody is around to chastise him because Yvonne is out on a date with the gardener. Driss returns to his old life as the days pass. He reconnects with old friends and tells the men in the suspicious car not to bother Adama any longer. When he goes to an interview for which he does not have enough experience, he manages to impress the employer by referring to himself as pragmatic and utilizing all of the art knowledge he gained while working for Philippe. As a result, he is hired as a driver. Philippe continues to dislike his new caretaker and is perpetually grumpy. When he refuses to let anyone in the house help him with his phantom pain one night, Yvonne calls Driss and asks him to come over. That's how they ended up in the situation in the first place, with cops chasing them down first and then escorting them to the hospital later. Driss drives Philippe to the coast after that little adventure, and the sight of the sea helps Philippe relax. Later, Driss trims Philippe's overgrown beard before taking him to lunch, but he doesn't stay because someone else will be keeping Philippe company today. Driss wishes him luck and finally returns his egg before departing, and Philippe begins to worry about being alone until he sees who his date is, Eleanor, who is overjoyed to see him and doesn't mind the chair at all. The real Count Philippe Pozo di Borgo now resides in Morocco, where he has remarried and 2 daughters. The real Driss, Abdel Yasmin Selou, owns his own firm and is married with 3 children. To this day, the 2 men are very close friends. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave a like to help the channel out.